we are joined with Jensyn Hallett and Hilary Trudell for the session Fundraising for Storytellers. Hilary is a facilitator, producer, and educator with over 15 years of experience. Okay, with 15 years of, I thought like, oh, maybe I'm on mute. Anyways, Hilary Trudell is a facilitator, producer, and educator with over 15 years of experience in the field of public service and the arts. She specializes in community engagement, arts education, and providing a platform for storytelling and space for building community. Hilary currently works as the Director of Local Programming and Regional Outreach at the Clinton School of Public Service, leading first-year students through their first fieldwork experience. In 2017, Hilary founded a storytelling initiative called The Yarn, whose mission is to amplify voices, build understanding, and create a space for human connection. Currently rounding out its fourth season, the Yarn team has produced 20 shows to date. Since moving back to Arkansas in 2015, Hilary has personally coached over 200 people in efforts to help them share their stories succinctly, effectively, and with impact. In 2018, she founded Akanza, a 10-minute play showcase, which she will usher into its fourth year in 2021, and she's a board member of the Akanza Arts Festival. Hilary is a strong believer in leveraging stories as catalysts for community building, education, and social change. Joining Hilary is Jensyn Hallett. She is a certified fundraising executive with experience leading the development of multifaceted fundraising plans to engage stakeholders and supporters on a global scale. Currently, she's the Director of Impact Capital with Heifer International and building innovative partnerships to ensure access to capital that creates sustainable impact within farming communities. Driven by her passion for women's empowerment, entrepreneurship, and equity, Jensyn strives to create an ecosystem that supports the purpose-driven economy in her home state of Arkansas. She's the founder of Jensyn & Co., helping others learn how to use their money for good through mindful spending, banking, and investing alongside their values. And she recently launched the Arkansas Invest for Better Circle, a group that focuses on teaching and empowering women to take ownership of their finances and make shifts towards impact investing. Jensyn believes that with more intentionality, we have the power to build stronger, more resilient communities. And she's also the Director of Revenue for the Yarn. So welcome, Jensyn and Hilary.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Sorry I couldn't unmute myself. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us during your lunch break. I hope you get a lunch break. I know we're mostly working from home. It's always nice to have a break in the middle of the day to connect and learn, and I really appreciate AFP Arkansas chapter setting aside this space for us to gather, learn from one another, and get to know each other a little bit as well. I don't want to take a lot of time introducing ourselves because Sarah did such a great job doing that already. But I will say one of the things that's funny is that my background is actually not in fundraising, and a lot of people don't know that. I really started my career in community and economic development, and particularly in program development, identifying challenges in the community and working with partners to set up programs and find funding to address those issues. But 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to join Heifer International and lead their U.S. government program, writing U.S. government and USDA grant proposal writing. And since that time, within Heifer, I've worked with foundations, corporations, major donor individuals, and now impact investors. And I'll tell you, storytelling has been an essential part of my work in every aspect of that. And like Sarah mentioned, I'm also on the Yarn team, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Hilary Trudell, who is the founder and executive producer, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Jensyn, and thank you, Sarah, for that lovely introduction, and to AFP for having us. I'm Hilary Trudell. I'm really excited to be here with my colleague, Jensyn, who is not only a member of the Yarn, but a good friend who I have been friends with for the past 6 years since I've been back in Arkansas. So I'm really excited to be presenting with her today. My background, my education is in theater and community engagement. And before I found myself here in Arkansas at the Clinton School, I worked for the Human Rights Campaign in Washington, D.C., helping volunteers use stories to build their donor bases and build their steering committees and advocate for equal rights. So I'm really excited to be bringing my knowledge and skill set here to Arkansas, a place that I have made my home. I'm originally from Tennessee, to help people tell their stories. And we'll find out why it's so important to tell your own story and how storytelling has the power to really move mountains if we want it to. So I'm really excited to be here today, and thank you all for joining us on your lunch breaks.
Just a quick snapshot of what we're going to be covering today. We're really going to take a look at why storytelling is important. I'm going to go over a few fundraising trends, even though I know, we're a group of fundraisers, so I don't have to dive too deep into that. Slide into why, storytelling in general, the structure of storytelling, and identifying your personal why, and then go a little bit into organizational storytelling and how you can align that story with your organization's mission and purpose.
Great, thank you so much, Jensyn. So before we get too in the weeds, I do want to give everyone an opportunity to really voice why storytelling is important to them and why we tell stories. So we have these two prompts up here, and in just a second, I'm going to put you in a breakout room, and you're just going to have one other person in your breakout room. So you and your partner, just want to give you a couple minutes to say, hey, I'm so-and-so. This is why we tell stories, and this is why I'm interested in this session. This is why I'm interested in storytelling. So again, you're just going to have a couple minutes to meet one other person on the session, talk about why we tell stories and why you personally are interested in storytelling. So I just want to make sure really quickly I've got everybody in a room, and then I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and everybody is in a room except myself and Jensyn. So we're just going to give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to close the rooms and come back and share. Again, why do we tell stories, and why are you personally interested in storytelling? So we will see you back here in just a couple minutes. Hello, welcome back. Hopefully you had a nice little chat with your partner. I know that wasn't very long at all. We're just doing some speed dating here for our lunch break, but hopefully you got a chance to connect with someone. And talk about why we tell stories and why you're interested in storytelling. So I'm just going to start with the first prompt, and let's use the chat for this one. And just throw it up there, one word, few words, whatever. Why do we tell stories? So this is when just throw your thoughts in the chat. Why do we tell stories? For what purpose? To share experiences, to educate, connect mission to donors and potential donors. Absolutely. Why else? Why else do we tell stories? To get buy-in, to persuade people to take action, to make needs real human. These are all great. Thank you so much. I'm going to call on Amy. If you could tell me a little bit more about what you mean by get buy-in.
Well, I think once you tell a story, it becomes real and people get invested. And then once they're invested, it makes the barrier for either if you're trying to get volunteers or you're trying to get donations or whatever it is for your cause. Once there's like that personal connection, it's kind of like a wave. Then it just kind of goes over, and the resistance is less to get people to participate, basically.
Thank you so much. So you used a golden word, the word connection, right? We use stories as an opportunity to connect, which we'll talk about just a little bit more in just a second. I just want to ask one more. Mimi, visualize results. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about what you mean?
Sure. We as fundraisers are lucky to actually meet the people or whatever we're supporting. My dog is growling. I'm sorry. Anyway, And when we see as fundraisers with our own eyes, what our organization has done, the results, it just, I mean, it's been life changing for me to travel to places like Ecuador or Kenya and actually see the money that I've raised from the donors. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes. So to tell that story and to actually put a real name to a real person, um, who and his family, his or her family, um, and then actually bring that little story home to say, and now, you know, their 3 girls can go to school. I mean, it's much easier to do that, and to have a donor see that in their mind, and the results, like, oh, these girls can go to school and they have this name and that name and the other name, then just kind of, you know, saying we've enabled 310,000 girls to go to school. I mean, there's no personal connection where you feel like you know this girl and her name is Rosa, you know. And so that's why a really good story or a video makes all the difference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mimi. You know, this visualization that you're talking about is so important. And I'm not going to get too, we only have, 45 minutes before questions today, so I'm not going to get into really in-depth details about it, but storytelling actually changes the way that our brain functions. And when someone is telling a story, our brain tries to visualize being in that story. So not only does storytelling give a face to a cause, but we actually, it is our closest way to really put ourselves in someone else's shoes is storytelling. And that creates empathy as well. Thank you. So let's talk about the next prompt. Oh, sorry, go back real quick, Jensyn. Why are you personally interested in storytelling? And so just use the chat again if you just want to pop in your thoughts. Why are you personally interested in storytelling? And it could be the same reason that we tell stories, but why are you interested? My college debt is tied to my journalism degree, drives philanthropy. I have a story to tell. Great. Caitlin, tell me a little bit about Drives Philanthropy.
I think it kind of goes back to how we were talking about why we tell stories. And when it comes to philanthropy, you know, sometimes the best thing you can do to, you know, compel someone to give can be through a story and somebody else's experience and sharing that experience with somebody else. Because a lot of people give to things that they may not necessarily have experienced firsthand. So being able to share that experience that somebody else had to really show the impact of philanthropy.
Great. Thank you so much. Sarah, you have a story to tell. So you're interested in sharing your own story, and tell me why that's important to you.
Yeah. It's kind of double fold. Like, I think I have a story to tell. It's cathartic to tell your story. And I think some of the experience that I've had would shed light on kind of a collective experience that a lot of us have that maybe others don't understand, or like would help kind of make someone feel like they're not alone. But I also have a passion for helping, others, in my network or people just in life in general, kind of have a platform for them to share their story, because I believe that experiences they've had shed light on kind of what things that they've experienced that maybe not all others experience, and then again kind of helps build that empathy.
Great, absolutely. Builds empathy, builds connection. It looks like Amy talks about an analogy or story being a great learning tool. You're actually 22% more likely to remember a presentation if it has a story in it. So there's all sorts of reasons you can advance. Jensyn, thanks so much. There's all sorts of reasons to tell stories, and it sounds like you and your professions have recognized the value of it. So we're going to get to some tricks in just a little bit, because I want to make sure we're leaving you with some tangible items. Love this quote. I don't know if anyone's seen the show Master of None, but she's the screenwriter for it. She says, "I'm writing my story so that others might see fragments of themselves." So this talks about that human connection. And also, you know, when we talk about storytelling, you might not have the exact same experience of the storyteller, but there are elements of stories, and we'll get to values in just a few minutes, that people can connect with. And beyond that, again, it enables you to be in someone else's shoes in the most way that we can. You'll never fully experience somebody else's experience, right? We cannot know the full experience of other people, but stories really open the door to at least let us learn about other experiences, and it creates empathy in that way. And you can go to the next slide, Jensyn. Thank you. The late Steve Jobs had this really amazing quote about storytelling. "The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come." So I just want to emphasize again the power of storytelling. And we'll talk about, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. We'll talk about the ethics of that in just a few minutes as well. But and a lot of times with my advocacy class, my students ask, what's the difference between manipulation and storytelling? And so we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this as well, because as fundraisers, you know, we have this this opportunity to share stories, but how we go about doing it also can matter, and builds trust with our community as well. So thank you for indulging in that grounding activity of why storytelling is so important. I'm going to pass it over to Jensyn to talk about fundraising trends.
Thank you. Yeah, so now let's talk a little bit about some numbers. Now that we know why storytelling is important, let's shift a little bit into fundraising trends, you know, and these trends come from the Giving USA 2020 report. And so these numbers are from 2019, which is interesting. I'm very excited to see the numbers when they come out for 2020 and see how you know, the last year has made an impact in fundraising trends. But just a quick overview, you know, in the year of 2019, over $449 billion were given. And, you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to kind of go through, like, if you think about gifts from individuals, you know, 69% of all contributions were from individuals, and that's over $300 billion. Grants from foundations was 17%, over $75 billion. And giving by corporations was 5%, and that was over $20 billion. So there's a lot of giving going on. So what inspires donors to give? And so you know, feel free to write in the chat like Hilary did for the storytelling prompts. You know, what do you think, what do people give to? What inspires them to give? Pull up my chat. Connection to the mission, people, their personal experiences, personal connection to the mission. Again, yes, feeling like they can make a difference, and their values. Connection to someone served by an organization. Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Altruism. So I'll just go on. You know, people give because they want to, because they're asked to make a change for the good. To opportunities, not necessarily to needs. To success, not distress. And ultimately, people really give to people. They give when they're connected to people who have either gone through an experience, or people that they know who inspire them, who are within the organization. And I really want to highlight that while, you know, we went through, you know, giving by individuals, foundations, and corporations, and there's even bequests in there that I didn't have a specific slide for, but really behind all of those organizations and behind all of those gifts are people giving to people. And so the big secret for inspiring people to give is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I don't know, in here, you can just raise your hand. Has anyone in here heard of Simon Sinek or read his book? Okay, so I'm not going to go too deep into this because we're kind of running out of time and I want us to get into the nitty gritty of the storytelling structure. But I will, after my section, I'm going to share the TED talk that he's done. It's 18 minutes, but it's amazing and it's really helpful. If anyone else has the TED talk link, feel free to throw it in the chat. But let's see. So he has a book called Start With Why. And the whole idea is really, you know, that a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, you know, they share the what they do and they share the how they do it. But what really drives people to give and support is the why, the purpose, the underlying cause and belief that you as a person or you as an organization are truly and genuinely driven by. And so I'm not going to dive really deep into that. This is what he uses. It's called his golden circle. And you'll see, you know, the why is at the center of everything that you do. And so the what and the how you do it all drives back to the why. Why do you exist? What is your purpose? And let's see, and how do you set that up? I want to shift over to Hilary so she can talk a little bit more about the vision and how we do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jensyn. Yeah, I love this quote because it kind of pivots us from the why to our values, right? So we have reasons for doing things. And when we really drill down into it, our reasons are driven by values. And values are such an inherent connector within stories, right? So, and you can go to the next slide, Jensyn. We'll talk about an example in just a second, but I also want to emphasize how storytelling has been used as a form of advocacy for, you know, for years and years and years. And Martin Luther King has this great quote: if you want to move people, it has to be towards a vision that's positive for them, that taps important values and gets them to something they desire. It has to be presented in a compelling way that they feel inspired to follow. And what better way to inspire people to show your values, to give them a vision, than through story? And so there's a lot of activists that have used story as a form of, you know, moving people towards a common goal. So we can go to the next slide. But before we really, so we've been talking high level, and as fundraisers, you probably are all aware that storytelling is really effective, and that having a vision and letting donors see themselves in your vision is really important, right? Giving people an opportunity to live out their values. But before, you know, in order to really understand what makes a compelling story, I want to break it down. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to think about your story in this structure that I'm going to give you. You know, I know there's a journalism major on the line. I think it was maybe Amy, but you might have gone through story structure before in your education. It can be portrayed in different ways, but I like to just to minimize the structure into a really simple acronym. I call it the 3 C's. So we have, well, not acronym, essentially it's just 3 C's. So we have choice, challenge, and change. This person right here in the story of your life is you. So we can throw a 4th C in and say character. So with any story, with any compelling story, with any story that is moved forward in the plot, there has to be a character that wants something. So we want tons of things in our lives. In the story of your life, you have wanted multiple things, long-term, short-term. You wanted a cup of coffee, or you want to be president of the United States. We want things, okay? So the story really comes into play when something gets in the way of what you want. If I want a cup of coffee and I go to the kitchen and I grab a cup of coffee, great. that's a cool visual, but it's not exactly much of a story because nothing got in my way. Okay. So that's when the challenge comes in. What is in your way? And then you have your choice, right? We have choices every day. I'm going to go left or right. I'm going to choose to keep working towards my degree, or I'm going to quit and do something else. I'm going to choose to help this person, or I'm going to keep walking, right? We have choices every day. So the story structure really comes into play when you make that choice as to how you are going to get what you want. Okay. But when we talk about really motivating stories or stories that have a moral lesson, the change is really the part that holds that moral lesson, right? How are we growing and developing and changing because of the challenges and choices we've made in life? So I'm going to give you an example. We can go to the next slide, please, Jensyn. One more. So I'm going to give you the example of Finding Nemo. Okay, so Pixar is really great at following a structure. And if anybody has read To Sell is Human, the author talks about how the Pixar picture has been made famous in ways to also sell, right? Their story structure is it's pretty much the same in all of their films. So we're going to talk about Finding Nemo. So let me just ask real quick, who's the main character? Not a trick question, but kind of a trick question. Who is the main character in Finding Nemo? You can put it in the chat or just yell it out.
I say Nemo's dad.
Yeah, let's talk about the dad. There's parallel stories that go on in this movie, but for the purposes of our structure, we're going to talk about the dad. So Marlin, right? He starts off, he's very frightful. As many Disney or Pixar movies start off, the mother dies. She gets killed, I think, by a barracuda or something. All the other little eggs get eaten by some big scary fish. And Marlin is left with his one fish son, Nemo, right? He's got a little fin, and Marlin is very protective. He's so protective that he doesn't want he doesn't want Nemo to leave the reef, right? And so he's controlling, he's protective, he's fearful. Then one day, and I should say, what he wants more than anything is to keep Nemo safe, right? Is to protect Nemo. Now, one day, Nemo rebels, as all little fish children do, I'm sure, and he swims off the reef and he gets kidnapped by a scuba diver, right? And taken to what looks like a dental office in Sydney, Australia. And so Marlin is now faced with a challenge. He wants Nemo to be safe. The challenge is Nemo has been abducted, and Marlin has a choice to make. Do I stay on the reef? Do I send somebody else to look for him? Do I, all the things that he could do other than swim out into the wide blue sea and search for Nemo himself? Okay. And what does he choose? He chooses, essentially, it's the title of the movie, to find Nemo. So his choice is to find Nemo. And he goes on this adventure. He meets Dory. He has the turtles. He has the vegetarian sharks. He has the jellyfish. He has the fact that Nemo is literally in an aquarium out of the ocean. There's seagulls involved, I think, at some point. But ultimately, Nemo and Marlin are reunited. They're back together. Marlin gets Nemo. They go home. Now, and this is most in every story in which we are really feeling the feels, especially at the end, how does Marlin change, right? He changes. He goes from fearful, controlling dad to kind of life of the party. He relaxes. He takes all the other little fish friends to school. Him and Nemo have connected more. He grows. He becomes a different fish because of this journey. Okay. And if you analyze, not only Pixar movies, but if you think about the movies that you love, there's always a character that wants something. And usually there's a change at the end of the movie. The character evolves, they change. Now, if you think about movies that you hate, you might, and if you're, just sitting at home one day thinking about this, you might think about if any of those characters in that movie have values that you can resonate with, that you connect with. An example I like to give, a movie that I really don't like, is The Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino. It's not because I don't like Quentin Tarantino movies, but no one in that movie really demonstrates the values that I hold dear, and I just don't like the way they are. I cannot connect with any character in that movie, and so therefore except maybe the really nice candy people that get killed at the beginning. I don't know if anyone's seen it. So I don't like that story, right? I don't connect to that story. And we can go to the next slide. So with the next few minutes that we have left, I want you to just take some time. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jensyn. To think about, and this is, I'd like to also emphasize that this is an iterative process. The storytellers that I start working with usually come with A, they don't think they have a story, B, they don't know what their story is, C, their story is totally different than what it ends up being on stage. So I want to just say this is iterative and this is your first step. But I want to ask the question, why do you do what you do? And so let's talk about this in the career sense. Why do you do the work that you do? And within that, I want you to contemplate, what is it that you want? And is there a challenge that's getting in the way? And that might compel you to be doing your work, or that might have compelled you to choose your work. What choices do or did you make within this story? And how have you changed? I'd also like to emphasize that you could be in the middle of your story, right? You could have made a choice to start a new job and you don't know exactly all the ways you're going to change, but you can see it happening, right? So you don't have to have, all of our stories are not Finding Nemo. I would also like to say our stories do not end when the lights go on and we all stand up and leave the theater, right? But we do have stories that happen to us every day, every year, that are still ongoing. And so what I'm going to ask you to do right now is just take a couple minutes to think about your story. What brought you to this job that you're in? And I'm going to stop talking for 2 minutes. And let's see, I'm going to actually, just because of time, I'm just going to see if anybody wants to share, but I'm going to stop talking for 2 minutes and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to write these down. Okay, so at 12:39, I'm going to start talking again. Okay, Meredith, I'm ready. What's your story?
Okay, so I started my career in PR, that journalism degree, college debt. And I wanted to work for a place where I was promoting things that were important and meaningful, and landed myself with an agency that was very toxic. And so that was my challenge that got in the way of me doing good work that was fulfilling. And so I started looking for another job. And one day my former boss told me about this job to share with a peer. And they ended up not being interested in it. It sounded exactly like what I was wanting to do. And so I had to make the choice. I was newly married. So I had to decide, did I want to start this whole new career, or did I want to stay where I was? So I chose to come to CareLink, and I have absolutely loved it because our mission hits close to home for me. I have a grandmother who just passed away. She was showing signs of Alzheimer's, and my dad's oldest sister was her family caregiver. And so what we do to help older people was very important to me and close to my heart. And then I was then named the director of our development. And so now my challenge is that I have no fundraising experience really. So I'm taking the steps to get certifications and education so that I can better serve older people, this organization, and my team as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. In terms of the structure, I knew that you wanted to do something meaningful and important, but this toxic work environment was getting in your way. So that was your challenge. You had a choice to make. Do I go to this other job? And you did. And then I heard how it connected to your values, why this other job was so important, right? Because you have this personal story. And I'm not a professional fundraiser, but I do know that because you have this personal connection to your work, it's going to only benefit you in your fundraising. Something that I would have asked you if we were doing story coaching was, why journalism? Why was that important to you? And you talk about your meaningful and important work. And I would really try to distill that down until to your values. What's meaningful? What's important, right? And we get into that when we start hearing about your grandmother. So that's the first time that I got a little bit of a glimpse into, okay, this is a little bit of Meredith's backstory. So thank you so much. And just from that, I just want to emphasize that, Meredith has this great story and this structure, but talking to people, asking them what resonates with them is what is going to really help you hone your story in, right? What did you connect with? I connected with your grandmother instantly. I was like, oh, that's the connection that you have to CareLink. And so when you're talking about CareLink, this personal connection of how, taking care of your grandmother has affected you is going to be a really amazing story to help you mobilize fundraisers. Jensyn, I want to just pause and see if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you sharing, Meredith. I'll say I teared up, just listening to you even, and like what Hilary said, when you brought up your grandmother, that's when it really connected for me. And I would say, that is the connection, the personal connection you have to CareLink, and how, you're in this crucial, or this critical role that you play in development to help the organization serve more folks who are like your grandmother, and so that's just really powerful. And I think that donors will really connect with that as well.
Awesome.
Thank you. I'm making notes of y'all's feedback. So thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Thank you so much, Meredith, for sharing. Because of time, I want to just move forward because we have just a few other things that we need to cover, and I want to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time. But thank you so much, Meredith, for sharing. And just, you saw in that very, very small moment how just talking to people about your story and getting feedback can really help you craft it. So I just want to emphasize that knowing your why and understanding the structures of what makes a good story is really going to help you identify stories in the field, right? So it's not always us that are telling stories, right? But we are going to talk about the ethics of that in just a second. But understanding, so we just talked about what resonated with us, right? And if we think about what resonates with us, when you start hearing stories, you'll start saying, okay, aha, that's the thing that gave me the goosebumps. That's what we need to work with here, right? And we all know it because we all feel the feels when we hear stories, right? Let's go to the next slide, and I want to make sure we're opening up space for questions. So how do, a lot of times we're talking about organizational storytelling. So, okay, Hilary, Jensyn, thanks. I know how to tell my story now, but how does that help me in my work? Well, again, it all comes down to values. So if your organization, first of all, does not have really clearly communicated common values, that's going to be a first step, because your stories are going to reflect those values that you want to put out into the world. There's a really cool activity that I do with my students every year. They are very frustrated by it, but I think it's great. That essentially I have them write down, and we have a big list of values, and they can choose their own that are on the list, and they choose 10 values. What are your 10 top values? And then one by one, I have them throw them away until they're left with one. And that really helps them. A lot of times they haven't ever thought about this, right? What is my one value that I'm going to hold on to the very end? But that can be a really effective activity for an organization too, because some things might come up. Somebody might say, oh, it's this one, and somebody else might say it's this one. And that's a really great activity for your organization to go through, so you can figure out, okay, it's these 3 values. These are most important. These are the ones that we want to find stories that really highlight, right, that go along with. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Jensyn. You're so great with these slides. One more. I want to also just quickly touch on, and this could be a whole class, but I want to quickly touch on the ethics of story sharing. This is a really powerful quote from Maya Angelou. I love it. I love it. I love it. There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And while telling your story can be incredibly empowering, not being able to tell your story can also be very damaging. So whenever you have an opportunity to allow someone else to speak their truth and to tell their story themselves, I highly, highly, highly recommend that. If you're going to share someone else's story, just making sure that you have full permission, that they have at least as much ownership in the process of you sharing that story as possible, because our stories are our truth and they make us human and they give us power, right? So we don't want to take power away from anyone. We don't want to take anyone's story away from them. So just briefly, just making sure that we are giving people the opportunity to speak their own truths and share their own stories. And I want to go to the next slide, and Jensyn, I'm getting to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there, particularly that is such an important like piece for us to remember, especially in our organizations. And we are so, in this sector, we're looking for revenue, we're looking for donations for our organization. So those stories can be they can be so powerful, but like Hilary said, making sure that you're empowering those who own the story to really be comfortable in that. And I have witnessed kind of in the fundraising and in the marketing space, there have been a lot of organizations or a lot of individuals, people who have come out and said, that they felt used by an organization or other things. So I think that that's just a really important point to remember and really think about, like, our narratives and how we're shaping those, and whether or not we're empowering others to tell their own story.
And one last thing before I pass it over to Jensyn to wrap us up, because she's going to give you a really great tool. I also want to share a video in the chat that talks about how incorporating someone else, your donor, into the story and making them the hero is very important. It's a really great video that really breaks that down in the chat. So just another tool for you. And I want to pass it over to Jensyn to talk about a couple more tools and then wrap us up. You're muted, Jensyn.
Thank you. I won't spend a lot of time on this. I know we're also running out of time, but this is a good place to start. If you're not sure where to start, it's called The Minute Message, and it's by Mission Minded. I think it's Mission Minded, and it's the Minute Message Model. Sorry, there's a lot of M's going on there. But you can Google it, or we can find the link and share it with you all. But, if you think about your organization and what your organization believes, usually that is like driven by a vision. What is your organization's vision? What are your values? What do you believe? And this is just a little tool that kind of helps you break down what you do and how it ties back to your vision. And so I just wanted to share that tool with you all as a good, starting place. I think one of the other things that I really wanted to remind everyone is that storytelling is not just important in cultivation and getting new donors, but it's also really powerful in stewardship and throughout that whole donor cycle, the whole fundraising cycle. And it really, using storytelling in the right way can help you empower your donors to become part of your organization's story and really take ownership in helping you reach the mission. And I also just wanted to remind you, Hilary said earlier, this is an iterative process. It takes time, and if you're doing this within an organization, sometimes you want to have a consistent message with multiple departments or multiple people who are out in the community kind of telling your organization's story. So I don't want people to feel like like they don't have it all together after this session, because this is a process, and it's something that we're learning, and a lot of organizations are learning, how to shift their message and tell those stories in a different way. So just also want to point out, that Hilary and I, are always here to help. I think I've put a block here, but we're always here to help. So if you or your organization would like to dive deeper feel free to reach out to us, and we would be happy to set up something with your organization or with you personally. I know Hilary also does one-on-one coaching for folks. You have anything to add to that, Hilary?
No, I think that was awesome. And I just want to put a few more tools in the chat because we have such a brief time together. We are happy to work with you all one-on-one as organizations. Jensyn and I are both experienced facilitators and really love working with organizations, but a couple other tools that you can use on your own. The Pixar pitch is something that I referred to earlier. The book that kind of made that famous is called To Sell Is Human. And then Marshall Gans, who is a fairly famous activist from the 1960s farm workers movement, published a worksheet called Sharing Your Public Story, and that talks about the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. And if you're more interested in learning about that or that format as used by advocates, please let us know. But it's also, you can Google it and find these tools.
Yeah, thank
So
you guys so much for joining us. Like, I really enjoyed this session. I'm definitely gonna steal some things, but thank you so much. And yes, I also could pass it off to you as well to kind of talk more about your one-on-one coaching trainings if you would like. But as kind of just, I guess, some reminders for everyone, our next monthly session is March 18th at 9 a.m. With Shannon Boshier. She's talking about fundraising, professional development, growing your career. So you don't want to miss that one. And in the chat, I'll put a link to where you can sign up for that one. It may not be in there yet, but you could kind of keep it as for future reference, going ahead and signing up. So kind of check the Facebooks, check your email, and make sure you get signed up for that one when you can. But thank you guys so much. And I'm ready to go if y'all are ready to go.
Y'all have a good day. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you, Mimi, and everybody. But
thank you.